Before you embark on your learning journey, it's a good idea to learn how you can navigate through the course interface and make the best use of the available features. When you access a module, you'll first view the landing page, which displays its title and the content structure. You can begin the module by clicking the Start Module button. This takes you to the first lesson. You can also view the content structure for each module in the left panel. Each module is divided into sections, and each section consists of lessons. You can also navigate to any lesson by clicking the lesson title in the menu. Note that you can go through the lessons in any order, and you can revisit them at any point. Keep in mind that to complete a lesson, you must scroll all the way down until you see the button that indicates the title of the next lesson. You can check your progress of the module at 2 levels. If you're looking for a specific topic, you can use the search feature. Videos are played using a custom smart player, which provides several features. The Captions button enables you to switch off or display the captions in one of the available languages. You can also customize the way captions are displayed by clicking on the caption settings. From here, you can increase or decrease the font size of the captions and even choose between different colors and transparency levels for the caption's text and background. If you prefer a faster or slower playback speed, you can change it in player settings. To navigate to other modules in the course, you click the Previous or Next buttons. You can also click the View Full Path button to view all of the modules available in the course. To complete a course, you must complete all of the modules that are marked Required. You're now ready to expand your learning horizons at UiPath Academy. Happy learning! Hello, and welcome back to the RPA Developer Production Ready Essentials training. Today, we're going to see and explain an example of string manipulation, which is frequently encountered in a great variety of business scenarios. Let's consider the example of a process that comprises two steps: extracting an address from an application and entering it in a different one. For the sake of simplicity, let's call them Application A and Application B. Even if the address format is city name, and street number in both of them, Application A provides all of the pieces of information in a single field, but Application B can only store them in 3 different fields. The solution is to employ string manipulation methods to isolate the needed items, namely the city name, the street name, and street number, and then input the result in Application B. Are you ready to find out how that can be achieved using UiPath Studio? Let's begin. We'll build a sequence called bookstores. The project that we're about to create extracts some information from an input text and outputs it in a different format. The input string is generated by an application that searches for a specific writer and finds the bookstores where his books are available. The initial format is: you searched for author X. His books can be found at the following stores: Bookstore 1, Bookstore 2, Bookstore 3. After the execution of the workflow, the format will be availability for X, Bookstore 1, Bookstore 2, Bookstore 3. Let's start with an annotation to explain the purpose of this automation instance. And we're ready to create our first variable to store the initial message. We can add a default value or use an assign activity to determine the content of the variable. Let's go with the second option. We'll rename this to assign initial message. We'll add the message variable in the to field. Next, we can simply copy and paste our sentence in the to field and make sure that it's placed between quotation marks. To start processing the string and extract the author and the bookstores, we'll create 2 variables, a string called author and a list of strings named bookstores. Let's extract the author using an assign activity. This is the expression that we need to type. Firstly, message.split divides the message into 2 different sentences using the period character as a delimiter. Now, there are 2 period characters in our input text, so it was split into 2 array elements. The author name can be found in the first element, which is why we continued the expression this way. Now, since the sentence is of the array item type, we need to convert it to a string that can be split further, hence the usage of the .toString method. So far, we've isolated the piece of text that we're interested in. Next, we'll use the substring method on the message variable, which has already been split once, so it only contains a sentence. The name of the writer is mentioned after the author term, and the last index of method places the index right after the mentioned string. At the end, all that's left is the name of the author. Let's move on to the list of strings. Firstly, let's create a variable called bookstores and set its type to list of strings. Moving on, we'll add one more assign activity to the designer panel to write an expression that extracts the bookstore list, and we'll call it getBookstoreList. Let's write down the expression, and we'll explain every part of it afterwards. Okay, let's begin. The split method turned our message string into 2 distinct array items. Nothing new here. Next, 1 is the index of the sentence that we want to extract. Remember that array items are 0 indexed. The sentence is then turned into a string and split once again after the colon. The resulting string is the bookstore list, or the last element. The list was split once again after the colon, and the result, namely the bookstores, are stored in a list variable. And the final step is to print the message to the output panel, and we'll create one more variable to store our processed message. Let's open the expression editor and fill in the field. Firstly, the string.format enables us to display the content of a variable as a string, regardless of its type. The next part is the text that we want to print to the output panel, followed by the arguments to be printed. The VBCR constant moves to the next line, in order for each bookstore to be printed on a separate line. Let's run it to see how it goes. Okay, here is the message in the new format. And that was all for today. Thank you for watching. Hello, and welcome to RPA Developer Production Ready Essentials training of UiPath Academy. In this video, we'll cover working with lists, which are the first data type covered in our current data manipulation lesson. Lists are largely used in programming, and RPA makes no exception. Anytime usernames, employee numbers, invoice numbers, and other elements need to be captured, stored, or processed, lists can be suitable. We'll start this demo by creating two list variables that contain city names, and we'll proceed by merging the variables together to create a new list of strings. Once we've finished that, we'll format all the city names to the proper case, namely capital letters followed by lowercase ones. In the end, we'll print the content to the output panel to check if the operations were performed as expected. Okay, let's start. We'll create a new process. We can name it City List Demo and also add a brief description such as Demo for working with lists. Next, let's add a sequence to the designer panel and use an annotation to mention the purpose of the workflow. Prints an ordered list containing the city names from two initial lists of city names. Okay, now one of our variables is meant to store the names of some cities in Spain, and the other one contains United Kingdom city names. We'll create the two variables with appropriate names, Spain cities and UK cities. Then we need to choose the variable type. To do that, let's click Browse for Types and search for List. We'll select the one under System.Generic. Since we want to store city names, we'll choose String as the type of the elements and select OK. Our second variable has the same type. Alright, now although our two lists are declared, they don't exist as objects yet. As a result, they need to be initialized and populated with values. For demo purposes, we'll have a look at how to do that in two different ways. Let's initialize and populate the Spain cities list in a single line. First, we will initialize the list by writing new list of string. Now the collection exists, but it's empty. So we'll specify the values that we want to append by adding from Madrid in caps, Valencia in lowercase, Barcelona in caps again. As for the second list, we will use the add-to-collection activity to populate it. But first, let's instantiate the object by writing new list of string as we did previously. Now let's say that we want to add two cities to the list. For this, we need to drag and drop two add-to-collection activities. In the Properties panel, we'll specify the collection in which we want to add a value, UK cities. The item that we want to add between quotation marks, London, and the type argument. The item type is a string in our case. And let's rename the activity for increased readability. Let's call it Add London to UK Cities. We will perform the same steps for the second Add to Collection activity, but we will add another value this time. Let's enter Manchester in capitals. Great! Now the first list is populated with 3 values and the second one with 2. Next, we need to merge the 2 lists, so let's create a new variable to store all the city names. We'll name it All Cities, and of course, choose the appropriate type. Notice that the city names added into the lists are written randomly, some in uppercase and some in lowercase. So, let's add an annotation to specify that. List of city names before format. This business scenario is frequently encountered. Think of the names stored from a web form. Some people write in proper case, others in all caps, and so on. Alright, back to merging the lists. So, to do that, we can use enumerable.concat method. We can notice in the method signature that only parameters of the enumerable type are accepted, but our collections are lists. Consequently, to make this work, we need to add dot as enumerable after each one of them to convert the list items to enumerable types. Since that method returns an enumerable, we need to convert the result of the concat method back to a list. We can do that by using toList method. More specifically, we'll type .toList at the end. Great! Now let's rename the activity. To sort this list, we can use the Visual Basic sort method. But keep in mind that this method does not return any value, so we cannot use it in an assign activity. Instead, we can use the invoke method activity. Our target object is all cities, and the method name is sort. OK. Now we have an ordered list that contains all the city names, the ones in Spain and those in the United Kingdom. Moving on, we'll format them to start with a capital letter followed by lowercase ones. We need to store the values into another variable, all cities proper case. Don't forget that this variable needs to be initialized. In order to format it, we need to loop through each element of the all cities list, so we'll use a for each activity. Let's select the argument type, which is string in our case. At each iteration of the loop, every item will be processed using the string conversion method. This is the expression that we need. Next, each formatted item needs to be added to our new collection using an Add to Collection activity. Alright, let's display the values in the final list in a message box. To print all elements in a single message, we can use the string.join method. We need to specify the separator, let's go for a comma and a space, and indicate the collection that we want to print. All cities, proper case. OK, now let's run it. As you can see, all the city names are arranged in alphabetical order and written in the proper case. And this concludes our video on working with lists. Thank you for watching. Hello and welcome back to the RPA Developer Production Ready Essentials training. In this tutorial, we will focus on the usage of dictionary variables. More specifically, our key or value pairs will consist of some names and birthdays, which will be processed so as to print some pieces of information to the output panel. After running the workflow, we will see the names of all the people, whether or not they've celebrated their birthday yet this year, as well as the day of the week when their birthday falls. Alright, let's start by creating a new project called Birthday Check. Let's also add a description, Demo 1 for dictionaries. The first activity that we're adding is a sequence. To follow the best practices, we will proceed by adding an annotation to explain the purpose of the workflow. This way, we facilitate the maintenance of our project by describing the automated actions. Let's mention the information to be extracted. And we've completed this initial step. Moving on, let's create the variable that stores the names and birthdays. Birth dates is a good name for it. The dictionary type is not included in the drop-down list, so we need to click on Browse for Types and search for System Dictionary. We must now choose the data types of the keys and values, both of which are strings. Now that our dictionary is declared, we need to instantiate the object using the new keyboard, as we did in the case of lists. We will type new dictionary of string, comma, string, since both the key and the value will be of the type string. The next step after declaring and instantiating our variable is populating it with values. We will use the assign activity, as we often do, to set variable values. Let's fill in the in field by entering the birthdate variable first. The next item that we must type is the key, which should be placed between brackets. In this particular case, the key is the name, and the value is the birth date. We are using the American date format. And let's add one more assign activity and repeat the steps that we've just performed to add the second pair. The birth date variable is followed by the key placed between brackets, and the value field contains the date. Before moving on to the next activities in our workflow, we'll add one more key value pair to our dictionary variable, so we'll use one more assign activity. Enter the third name and the corresponding birth date as before, and that's it. We've just finished populating our dictionary variable, and we've renamed all the assign activities, but let's also rename the entire sequence to provide a brief description. Add elements to dictionary. Now we need to process the values that we've just defined to extract and print the information that we need to the output panel. Since all the items stored in our variable require the same type of processing, we can use a for each activity. Firstly, let's change the argument type to string. Next, we'll define the item collection that we need to loop through. So let's enter the birth date variable and the keys indicator, which returns all our keys as a collection of strings. Since the values paired with the keys are of the string type, we need to convert them to a more suitable format, namely the date time one. As a result, our next action is to create a new variable for the birthdays. Let's name it date current person, as its value will change with each iteration. Browse for types and write date time in the search box. The type that we're interested in can be found under the system category. Moving on to the body of the for each activity. We will use assign to pass the dates, so we can enter the variable that we've just created in the to field. We'll use the datetime.pass method for the required conversion. To access the value that corresponds to a key, we'll type birth date of key, which in our case is item. We'll rename the activity, and we're done. Alright, the birth date can now be extracted successfully. So we'll move on to the next piece of information, the anniversary day. We need a new variable. Let's call it current year anniversary. And select the date time type. And enter the variable in the to field. Let's open the expression editor and create a new datetime object whose value should consist of the current year, the birthday month, and the day. Next, the anniversary day should be stored in a string variable. So, let's go ahead and create one called weekday anniversary. Now we can simply assign it the value of current year anniversary dot day of week dot toString, which retrieves the day of the week property of the specified date. The final piece of information that we want to include in the text printed to the output panel is whether or not the birthday of each person has passed or not. An if activity is exactly what we need for that. In the condition field, we will check if the value of the current year anniversary variable is less than datetime.today. We'll use two log message activities, one under then and the other under else. We will use the string.format method, as the message that we want to print is a complex one. In the then section, the displayed message should state that the birthday of the person has already passed. The birthday of open brackets 0 close brackets, which is a placeholder for the key or the name, has already passed. It was on a open brackets 1 close brackets, and add the item and the weekday anniversary variable. Moving on to the else section, we can copy and paste the previous message and adjust it. The resulting message is the birthday of open brackets 0 close brackets is in the future. It will be on a open brackets 1 close brackets, followed by our two variables. Okay, let's run the workflow. If we look at the output panel now, we can see the three names and the corresponding messages. And that was all for today. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to the RPA Developer Production Ready Essentials training. Now that we've built a workflow which processes dictionary keys and values, it's time to delve even deeper into the topic by creating a project that combines the usage of dictionary and list variables. Let's begin. First things first, let's create a new sequence called Dictionary Demo 2. We'll also add a short description. As you can remember, the dictionary variables in the previous video comprised a key and a single value. This time, we'll see how we can associate one key with multiple values. More precisely, we'll assign the name of a country to the key and some city names to the values, which will be stored in a list of strings. Let's start by adding a sequence on the designer panel and declaring a variable called cities. We need to browse for the system dictionary type and set the key as string. To set the value as a list of strings, we'll click Browse for Types once more. Select the list option in the System Collections generic category and click OK. We can notice that the type was updated in the search box, as well as in the Variables panel. Moving on, we need an assign activity to instantiate the cities variable. We'll open the expression editor menu to be able to view the entire value. Let's type new dictionary and open some brackets for the key value pair. The key is of the string type and the value is a list of string. Click OK. Let's rename the activity to instantiate new dictionary. Please note that we can also instantiate such variables using the default field in the Variables panel, but we used an assign activity in this case to make sure that the workflow is easy to read. We're now ready to populate our variable. Let's say that the first key is US. We'll add a new list of string from the following cities: Seattle, New York, and San Francisco. Let's include US in the activity name. A quick recap before moving on. The key is US, and the value consists of a list of string which contains the 3 city names. We'll repeat the procedure for our second country, the UK. Again, our list of strings contains some cities, namely London, Bristol, Manchester, and Edinburgh. And don't forget to rename the activity. The actions that we will automate next are adding one more city name to our first list, whose key is US, and then removing one of the values in the second list, which contains UK cities. In the end, we'll print everything to the output panel to check if the execution went well. Since our list of cities are collections, we can use the Add to Collection and the Remove from Collection activities. Now the Cities of US list is the one that we want to extend, so let's set the value of the collection property accordingly. To add, say, the city of Chicago, we simply have to fill in the item field. This exclamation mark will go away as soon as we set the argument type to string. And there we go. As always, we'll use the activity name to describe the action to be executed by the robots. Add Chicago to US list. OK, if we switch to the Remove from Collection activity, we can notice that its properties are identical. Let's set our second collection, Cities of UK. Picture a business scenario in which the names of capital cities must be stored separately. So London must be removed from the list. And change the argument type once again. Let's change the activity name. And we're done. At this point, we only need a couple of log message activities before running the workflow. Let's select the first one and rename it to Log Message US. We can copy and paste this activity below, but we need to change the name, as the second logged message should contain the UK list. Next, click the message field and type Cities US. To print all the collection items one after another, we'll use the string.join method. Let's set a comma followed by a space as the separator and provide the variable and the key of our list. Let's copy this. We'll move on to the next log message activity, paste the expression and replace US with UK. OK, the output panel displays both our lists. The first one contains Chicago, and the second one does not contain London anymore. And that concludes our lesson about dictionary variables. Thank you for watching. Hello, and welcome back to the RPA Developer Training. In this video, we will expand the string manipulation lesson by exploring the incorporated regex wizard in UiPath Studio and using it to process a string. Let's create a new project called Addresses. We'll add a short description and start building our sequence. We'll go ahead and rename it to make sure that the title is clear enough. And, as always, we'll write an annotation that contains details about our workflow. Alright, now we'll create a variable called addresses. Its type is string, which is exactly what we need in our case, so we won't change that. As for its value, we'll use, yep, you guessed it, the assign activity. Let's rename it to assign addresses. Our string contains multiple addresses, which will be separated from one another using the regex wizard. However, we'll do that later on in this demo. First, let's search for the matches activity and drag it to the designer panel. Since we'll use it to extract each street name, let's include that in the activity title to follow the best practices. When we click the Configure Regular Expression button, the regex builder wizard is displayed on the screen. At the moment, the wizard contains the default settings, so it identifies the ABC characters that can be found in the value field. The test text field enables us to see what the wizard identifies in a string sample. If, for instance, we write test ABC, we can notice that the value is highlighted as soon as we finish typing it. However, if we type ABCD, no match is found. Let's try typing ABCD. As you can see, the match is highlighted even if we didn't hit space before it. Let's move on to the regex field and expand the drop-down menu. Several expression types are available. We'll try picking a different one, say digit. All the numeric values are highlighted, but the letters aren't. To identify both the letters and the digits, the go-to option is any word character. Let's give it a try. The characters are also recognized when we change the text. Moving on to a different option, when email is selected, no match is found. Let's change the text to test@uipath.com. We can see that the entire string is retrieved right away. The defined regular expression is located at the bottom of the page, as well as under value. All good so far. What if we type in www.uipath.com? Of course, nothing is highlighted unless we select URL in the drop-down menu. This option identifies anything that starts with www, http, https, and so on. Okay, let's delete everything. Now there are several other options, but now we will focus on the advanced one, which provides the scope for us to define custom regular expressions. We will build a regular expression that matches numbers written in the decimal form, such as 130.87. This is the value that we need. And the expression was successfully identified. And now we'll paste in an already defined expression which searches for any digits, sequences of letters, or other specific keywords such as road, drive, avenue, and so on. We'll type something similar to an address to test this. And it works. If we examine the expression, we can find 1 to 8, which helps identify the digits, as well as A to Z, which retrieves literal characters. Next, we can find the specific keywords and abbreviations used in the addresses. Next, we need to take a look at the Properties panel. Let's provide the input string, namely the addresses variable. In the results field, we'll hit Ctrl+K to generate a new variable that will hold the identified matches. We'll call it Found Streets. Since we have multiple street numbers as part of our address, we should iterate through them using a for each activity. Let's call it for each match. Keep in mind that the type argument should be match in the system.text.regularExpressions category. The final step is to log a message with every address. Okay, let's run the workflow. And it all works perfectly as all the addresses are displayed. And that was all for today. Thank you for watching.